Today we're going to talk about the two main ways that you can turn photos black and white in Photoshop. And when we talk about turning something black and white, um, the reason we do that is it'll really bring out the texture, lines, contrast, edges, and shape of objects and people, shadows, details. And yeah, I want you to remember that color is an element of art and it can either be something that enhances your picture or detracts from your picture. In this case, I'm showing you a picture where color actually does matter because then you can, in some ways, you can see what black and white does because you'll see what comes out when you remove the color from the picture. Now, when we talk about turning something black and white, sometimes people think about that as desaturating or removing the color. But actually, there are two different kinds of adjustment layers that are really effective in doing it. Because if you just take the color away from something, you can get a really flat look. Um, just as a quick example, here's something where here's this same flower where all I did was desaturate it. And we can see it looks kind of gray. There's a flatness to it. You don't see the texture in great detail because it's all varying shades of gray rather than high contrast. But with one of the adjustment layers that we're going to talk about, which is called the gradient map, it looks like this. And so in this, you can really see the texture of the petals come out when you turn it black and white. So just desaturating isn't really the best way to turn something black and white. So we're going to talk about the two ways that are great. I'm going to actually start with blinding light, which is one of the two photos that I provided to you. And in this picture, color is not necessarily helping the picture. So the first adjustment layer that we're going to talk about is something called the gradient map. So I'm in Photoshop and I am in the photography workspace. So if you haven't already got Photoshop in the photography workspace, you should do so that your layout looks like my layout. And then I'm going over on the right-hand side to the Adjustments tab. This is where we found the layer levels adjustments before, and I'm going in the very last one. If I hover on them, you can see up here, it'll tell you the name of the adjustment layer, and I'm looking for the one that says gradient map. And all I'm going to do is click it, and bam, it's going to work. Now, the gradient map is really good for bringing out this very high contrast, really, really rich, dark blacks and shadows in a picture. So this is with it being in color, and this is with it being using the gradient map. And what the gradient map essentially is doing is taking all the pixels and assigning them on the full spectrum from dark to light. So here it is. If for some reason reverse is set up, you get the inverted image of it. You can just deselect it. I don't know why that would happen, but that's what it looks like. So pretty easy, pretty quick, and you just click the gradient map and there you go. So for this assignment, then you would just save this as a JPEG to show me that you did it. Remember always to save things as JPEGs. And then you can hand this one in. So really, really easy. The second one is going to be more complicated, and that is using the black and white adjustment layer. And the reason we want to do it in a way that's more complicated is because in this particular instance, it's going to give us a lot of control. Now, why is it more complicated? Well, I'm going to pop it on first to show you. So again, I'm in the Adjustments tab. And I'm going in the middle, you'll see an icon that's half black and half white, and that's the black and white adjustment. Now, off the bat, it doesn't do those super rich high contrast range. What the black and white adjustment layer does, though, is it lets us control how dark or bright the different colors that make up a color image are. so we can assign or make choices about how each color is dealt with as it's turned black and white. Color pictures are made up of red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. Um, and what you'll see, I'm going to do this really quickly just to show you, is if I move the green, for example, up and down really quick, what you'll see is the things that are green in the picture are affected mostly. So I can see the stems, the tree in the background are going to be affected, but not the flower because there's no green in the flower. Whereas if I move the magenta, the petals of the flower are affected really dramatically. Or if I move the yellows, the middle of the flower is affected most dramatically. Now I've just messed with it on the very bottom. If I want to just reset it back to its defaults, you'll see there's an icon on this very bottom part of the panel that looks like a curved arrow, and boom, that's back to just kind of the default. And now I can make very particular decisions about how I deal with the picture. In this case, it's really helpful. So I might choose to brighten or darken the leaves. I do want to bring out more of the center of the flower because it's dark and I'm losing that texture. So by bringing up the yellows, I can get more out of the middle of the flower. Reds are going to affect it as well because the flower is partially made out of red. So you can see that might darken or draw more emphasis into the middle. Whereas the magentas are going to make an overall effect on the petals. Maybe I want the greens to be less dominant or more dominant, depending on how much emphasis I want to draw to the flower, right? Because it's kind of making the background less dominant as I pull that up. And I can mess with it to taste. So again, this one gives us more choices to affect what kinds of decisions are made. The gradient doesn't do that. It just makes this really rich range and more contrast. So it depends how much control you want over the picture. This is the picture in color, and this is the picture as I turned it black and white. But you get to make decisions about how you want to do it. On this one also, you can stack adjustment layers. So I did the black and white, and maybe I want to make a little bit of a levels adjustment as well. That is something I can also do to just kind of bring out the remainder of the way I want contrast to work in the picture. I actually think I'm going to bring the blues up a little bit because that's going to bring out more contrast and brighten up the sky. The way it looked now looked a little kind of gray and dull. So I'm brightening the sky up a little bit as well. I would have to mess with it a little bit more to make some choices. And of course, you can continue doing the other techniques we've talked about. You could dodge and burn it. You could do all kinds of things. But that's the gist of how to use the black and white. When you're done getting it the way that you like it, remember to save it. Again, go to save it as a JPEG, and turn in your JPEG version so I can see that you took a stab at it. And now you know a little bit about turning things black and white.